As for Carlos, I feel he was quite quiet this weekend. There was a lot of expectations on him because every race he's driven in this year, he's finished top four, I think, which is very good for him, very consistent. And I think maybe the combination of the car and the track,
Hmm.
Carlos has just been let down. I don't think Carlos has, yeah, I don't think it's been a bad weekend for him. They're still
Still a
what
top
P4
five.
and P5
Still a
in
top
the
five. Yeah.
yeah, still great. It's still P4 and P5, not bad, but there's still work to be done.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Ferrari car maybe does have some limits, clearly. I think we assumed going into this race weekend that Ferrari would be far ahead. They would probably be in just about no man's land with Aston Martin, Mercedes, and McLaren in that midfield pack, Ferrari in no man's land, and Red Bull right up at the front. But what we saw this weekend was a little bit of blood. And I think that was especially characterized by the tantalizing battle in the sprint race, where we saw Alonso, we saw Sainz, we saw Leclerc, we saw Perez going at it in uh, this short form sort of conflict that the drivers undertake on the Saturday. Do you think that this weekend's sprint race has given credence to the claim that sprint race weekends are the preferable method of a race weekend in the modern age of Formula One?
I think it's an interesting question, this one, because I feel a lot of people, especially newer fans, like the idea of a sprint race because it gives you more racing opportunity, more action, and just more F1 in general.
Mhm.
You know, I think it's a I can see the opportunity, the potential, and it is a good idea. At the same time, when we're talking about F1 being a traditional sport, a traditional motorsport, that it's got its culture. You know,
Mm.
I think it feels not unnatural, but it feels a bit off to have two races
Yeah.
in one weekend. And I think in terms of it takes the whole idea away of a Grand Prix. You know, I think the race should be on a Sunday. That should be the final thing and the only sort of way to earn points in the weekend. And also, people do say that sprint races give a preview of the race to come the next day, which I think is not necessarily a good thing because it sort of not spoils it, but it sort of gives you an idea which can not necessarily be good all the time because you do want to be going into the Sunday watching the race and not knowing who's going to be where.
I think I agree with you as a traditional Formula One fan. I would much rather see the build up that we have in place and that we've had in place for a very long time. But we've seen it with other sports in recent years. For example, MLB, Major League Baseball. We've seen them ban the shift, which means that uh, hits are more likely, which means that you have a higher on base percentage. In the same vein, you have NCAA college football, where they've expanded the playoffs uh, after years of criticism for them being uh, too elitist. And again, these traditional methods of sports are just falling away. They're falling by the wayside from as a result of the demands of the public who want to see more drama and want to see more excitement. So maybe even though as traditional F1 fans we would prefer that it stayed the same, maybe sometimes development is necessary to, I guess, whet the appetite of newer fans. Do you think that, do you want newer fans? Do you want new fans to become invested in the sport? We've talked about this conversation before, but especially in 2024, with the sport in the situation that it is, where we have a race winner who is exactly the same week in, week out, do you think that it's important to have these moments of excitement?
Yeah, I think first, answering your first question, it's definitely important to bring in new fans, regardless of the state of the sport. I think Whenever I meet new people, I always tell them about how I'm an F1 fan, and if they aren't too familiar with it, I'm always trying to sort of advertise the sport to them. I think it's definitely great for new people to come in to the sport. Um, and I think the only issue with that is that if too many people come too quickly, the the idea of F1 sort of changes for newer fans because of fame or money, like we see with the sort of advertising and a lot of people having controversial views on Drive to Survive. I'm not too bothered about that myself. I think the more the merrier in F1. And then for your second question about having Max Verstappen winning all the time, I think that sort of does drive people away. I've met people who have unfortunately stopped watching F1 after the 2022 season because they couldn't be bothered to watch Max win it week in, week out. Um, but I think the true fans or the fans who show the most commitment are always going to be devoted to the sport, regardless of who is winning, because um, the true fans can always find excitement in other areas of the sport, not just at the front. That's what it's all about. There's a reason why there's 20 cars on the grid, and there's a reason why you can score points from the top 10 because
Yeah,
it gives the incentive to work harder and to be more competitive lower down the field.
yeah.
And that brings me on to a question for you, Ben, actually.
Mm.
Um, I overheard, or not overheard, I heard on the commentary Nico Rosberg and David Croft talking about a potential meeting for the teams discussing
Mm.
whether points should be going down to P12. What are your opinions on that, Ben?
Well, I tend to take the view that Nico Rosberg shared in his way that he does, that by increasing the number of drivers who are allowed or who attain points each race, it devalues the points themselves, and it means that teams now no longer have to work as hard. Because in an average race weekend, we could have, say, what, two retirements, and so that means that almost the entire field is given points. And I think there's certainly an argument to be made that some teams don't know what they're fighting for, but then so many teams will be achieving points that there's no more excitement in them. For example, Nico Hulkenberg with Haas this weekend, 1 point P10, but the the mechanics were going were well, the mechanics were far more excited than I'm sure the Red Bull mechanics were for that P10. I feel like you need that rarity in order to in order to keep the teams committed, in order to keep the viewers hooked, because they don't want to see every single team get a point. Because if they see every single team get a point, then points don't matter anymore. It's just a free for all. If I was to do anything, frankly, I would probably take it back to when it was points for the top six, because it's just you so rarely see it, and then that makes it more exciting. And then the battles are so much more interesting because you know that these teams are going to be fighting for something that um, they may not see too many times. But obviously, in modern F1, everything's a little bit more bunched up. So you're going to have Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull. They're going to make out the top eight. So those nine and 10 are going to be difficult to decide to decide with, or to debate with. And so I think it does increase the rarity of it. I think it does make the sport more interesting. I think it does keep the teams more interested in their sport and more invested and more passionate. But
Yeah,
at the end of the day, I mean, I guess it does get it gets the fans more behind their teams, because then there's more of a likelihood that their team will score points in each Grand Prix, and then that may make them more invested in their team. I think there's certainly arguments to be made either way, but as it is for now. What do you think, Amish?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you on that point. I think it does make it more competitive if um points start from top 10. It gives teams an incentive to work harder and it gives points more value. I think the current state of the point system is a good balance because I think it was pre 2010 when the point system was different. Points were more rare. They were rarer to get, and they were harder to get. And I think that the difficulty was sort of too high back then, and I think now is sort of a perfect level. I don't think it needs any change. I
Mm,
think I would rather, as a fan, I would rather see the addition of a new team rather than
mm,
a different point system because I think having more drivers and more cars just makes it more interesting compared to points. I think there's more opportunity in adding two more cars and a new team to championships than
mm.
there is changing the point system.
Is it important to you as an F1 fan that F1 grows as a business? Because I think the entire reason and the entire incentive for the switch, the initial switch from 6 to 10 drivers receiving points, was, as the argument is being made now, that it makes it more exciting, it gives teams more to be invested in, and it makes the fans feel like they're supporting a team that has the potential to score points each weekend. So, as a fan, does it actually matter to you that this is a purely business decision?
Well, I think as a fan, it's important that F1 makes enough money for sustainability reasons. I think if if F1 doesn't make enough money, then there's a problem. But that's never going to happen. That's not a possibility in my eyes. I think F1 will always get a steady amount of income. Something drastic has to happen for F1 to have to stop because of financial issues. Maybe teams themselves might experience financial issues, which we have seen in the past.
Mm,
For example, McLaren. But I think as a corporation, F1 will never sort of go down that path. I think the other problem, which is probably more common, is if F1 gets too big. I think we're sort of starting to see it at the moment with the introduction of multiple races in the United States. I think it's great to have more racing and expanding F1 in America, North America. But
mm,
I think there are other opportunities F1 can be taking. And I think what the opportunities that they are taking are sort of centered around fame and money. So, for like the Las Vegas Grand Prix, as much as it's great to be seeing that, I feel that we could be going to other countries and other continents, such as South Africa, like we've spoken about in previous episodes. But I think the way things are going, I think it's okay. I'm not too bothered about it, but I would like to see some, um, yeah, sustainable change.
mm.
That's what we would like to see.
This is actually a question that I was going to ask you on earlier about real fans. That was a concept that you had floated earlier in the episode. And I think that it's difficult because in order to be a real fan, you need to be somewhat conditioned into the truth of what Formula One is, which is not the 2021 season. That is not what Formula One is. That is a remarkable and abnormal miracle of a season that will not happen again for a while until these new regulations kick in and we get more drama than ever before because there's going to be so many teams bunched up close together and then teams will eventually work it out and it will go back to how it was. People need to have lived through or to at least understand the Schumacher, the Vettel, the Hamilton eras. And that's, I think, what the issue is with the modern Formula One fan is that there's a lack of understanding of those periods of time in which you have